Well, good afternoon or early evening, all of you out there in internet land. Thank you for tuning in to our webinar this evening. I'm Dr. Ben Vallarado, the Laboratory Director here at Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, and I'm going to be moderating and introducing this exciting presentation this evening by Ramson Lomatewama, I think is how you say it. Is that right, Ramson?
Lomatewama.
Lomatewama. Sorry about that. I was having difficulty with Hopi. But yeah, so before we get started, I'd like to tell you all a little bit about our webinar series this evening. To start with, I want to tell you a little bit about Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. And Crow Canyon Archaeological Center acknowledges the Pueblo, Ute, Paiute, the Dene or Navajo, and Hickory Apache people on whose traditional homelands this institution sits, and upon which we work and reside. Our mission-related work would not be possible without Indigenous people in the past, present, and future, and we respectfully recognize and honor ancestral and descendant Indigenous communities for their contributions to all humanity. Crow Canyon is grateful to all Indigenous people and supports the preservation and protection of cultural traditions, ancestral connections, and sacred lands. Our mission here at Crow Canyon is to empower present and future generations by making the human past accessible and relevant through archaeological research, experiential education, and American Indian knowledge. And you can find out more about our programs and research and initiatives at crowcanyon.org. And our campus is located just north of the Sleeping Ute Mountain in the southwest corner of Colorado. And when we reopen our campus to normal visitation, we invite you to come and check it out. In the meantime, please do check out our website and see all the exciting things that we're up to. And we, of course, thank you very much for supporting our webinar series. Now, before we get started, I want to give you a couple tips to enhance your viewing experience. And I know that many of us around the world have become intimately familiar with video conferencing program Zoom over the last 3 years. But just in case you are new to Zoom, I want to give you a couple tips. So first of all, you can move the talking heads. So at least on my screen over on the right to start with, you see a series of boxes with myself, Becky Hammond, Ramson, and Jeremy Grunvig, one of our webinar gurus. And but you can, if those are impinging on what you're seeing and it's blocking part of the presentation, you can change the configuration by just putting your cursor up on top of there and changing the way that it's outlined. So we invite you to do that. It might help you see more things. If you have questions throughout the presentation, we invite you to type those in the Q&A function. So on my Zoom program here, and we all have a version of this, you can see a little black box that says chat, raise hand, Q&A, and live transcript. And we invite you to click on that Q&A and put your questions in there. And throughout the presentation, Jeremy and I will be trying to compile like questions so we're not asking the same things. And if you want to just say hi to any of us or Ramson, you can go ahead and put that in the chat as opposed to the Q&A. And Ramson told us that he actually would prefer to have all his questions at the end of the presentation. So go ahead and type those in and we'll ask them at the end. If you're having difficulties viewing the presentation, you can switch over to our live stream at crowcanyon.org/Facebook. And that basically is about a 1 or 2 second delay. So it's pretty much up to the second. And you can try to put some questions in there too if you have them, and we'll try to integrate those as well. We also invite you to check out our presentations from past webinars, and I believe this one will be going up there as well on our YouTube channel. And you can get to that at crowcanyon.org/YouTube. And again, you can see webinars present and in the past. Most of them are up there. And we ask you to, if you are interested, like and subscribe to us on YouTube, because that can help us unlock additional functions that will increase your viewing experience. We have webinars every Thursday, and here's a preview, just a couple of the next exciting ones for the next 2 Thursdays. So on on November 10th, next Thursday, at 4 p.m., we have Curating in Context, a discussion on current Wheelwright Museum exhibitions with Andrea Hanley. And he said that's November 10th at 4 p.m. Check that out. And then on Thursday, November 17th, also at 4 p.m., we have a webinar that is co-sponsored by the Hisatsinon chapter of the Colorado Archaeological Society. And it's entitled A Summer of Reconnections, Redocumenting Dene Archaeology Sites on Chakra Mesa with Davina Two Bears. Like I said, that's November 17th at 4 p.m. Please check those out. But then this evening's presentation is going to be very exciting. We have an incredible artist who has decided to come and regale us with his great work. And the presentation is entitled Landscapes and Life, Expressions in Glass. And our author, our presenter, Ramson, is a glass artist, educator, and consultant. And he is the first documented Hopi glass blower and has been an educator for over 30 years. He was an adjunct faculty at North Central College in Naperville, Illinois, and has consulted for numerous museums, universities, and other organizations. And Ramson currently lives and creates his glass art on Third Mesa on the Hopi reservation. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and turn the mic and the presentation over to Ramson. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'll go ahead and let you share your screen.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I do feel honored to join this group and just to share some ideas that I have been experiencing for, I don't know, about 30 or 40 years, I suppose. It's been a while. I just returned from a 2-week artist in residence at high school called Idlewild Arts Academy in California, where I'm trying to instill the love of glass blowing to high school students from all over the world. So it's been a great trip, and I felt that this was a good opportunity for me to just kind of reflect on my own personal approach to glass art. And yeah, I guess the first thing is, why glass art? Well, because it's never been done culturally in our history before. I mean, I can't say that we have never been exposed to glass as a culture historically, because we have been by way of obsidian, and we used that material to make projectile points and cutting tools and things like that. So in that sense, we're not strangers to glass per se. But I wanted to take that further because, in Hopi culture, we have our kachina doll carvers, our textile weavers, we have our potters and our basket makers in terms of traditional arts. But in terms of contemporary arts, we have jewelers, we have painters, we have writers, but we never did have our glass artists. So that was probably the main reason why I chose to get into glass art, is to plant a seed for future generations and create another venue of expression of the Hopi culture. And for me, everything boils down to landscape, the land, living here, the ideas behind the land, how the land is significant to us in our culture. I mean, there are just so many facets that land plays in Hopi culture and Hopi worldview, that I felt that this would be a great opportunity just to expand on those ideas. So, this is a photograph of my cornfield below Third Mesa during the dry season. So it looks a lot different when planting season rolls around, but I just thought I'd give you just a glimpse into what the landscape is like out here to begin our discussions. So we can go on, advance to the next one. I'm looking at glass art and bringing it together and marrying it with traditional Hopi cultural ideas and Hopi symbolism and such. So I started just bringing the ideas and the materials together and creating something a little bit different. Uh, this is a series of glass platters that I call whirlpool blossoms because it's bringing together two aspects of Hopi. We're always dependent on rain to continue life, and every so often, when we during the monsoons when we have a heavy rain, there are places where we tend to get these little whirlpools going, and just the swirling of the water in movement says a lot about the continuation of life. But I also looked at uh, the richness of the land here by looking at the flowers that grow out here. So I took the idea of the flowers and the flowers that symbolize beauty and for lack of better terms, I would say innocence in the land. So I tried to bring these two ideas together, and what we see up here on the screen was the result of that. And I continue to just experiment with colors and patterns and such. And the really interesting thing about this is that you can never predict what the outcome is going to truly be, because you can never fully control the glass. So I equate this idea to raising children. We as parents, we raise our children uh, to be beautiful individuals, but as parents, we can only influence our kids up to a certain point, and then beyond that, they're going to do what they're going to do. And this is typically what the glass does. You can control the shaping and the colors up to a certain point, but once you get to um, trying to do anything more with it, the colors are going to flow uh, according to how they're going to turn out. So I sometimes I equate artwork with raising children. Okay, if we can move on. Of course, every culture is going to have a history, and the uh, I like the quote that Joseph Campbell left with us years and years ago when he defined mythology. He said that a myth is a statement of one's reality, and that little statement it's stayed with me all these years. So I look to Hopi history, what we would call our history, and what other people may call a myth. But the fact that it actually transpired, or it happened in a certain way, or this is all metaphorical, it really doesn't matter to me anymore, because this is my history. Uh, and again, we're talking about the land. The Hopi emergence story is very, very long. It's filled with a lot of detail, but in general, our belief is that we came from a world below this one through a hole in the earth that we call the Sipa Apani, which uh, loosely alludes to the navel. And so the Hopi believe that they were born into this world from a world down below. And seeing as we regard the earth as being female, our idea is that we were born into this world through our mother, the earth. And so the piece that you see there in the middle is a glass piece that kind of tells that story. It represents the Sipa Apuni. the emergence point from the lower world into this upper world, or from the womb of the female through the birthing process and coming into this world here. And I went a step further and tried to replicate the sandstone that's common around here. It's kind of a very, very light brown sandstone rock with this lichen that grows on it. But it's interesting because there are only 3 colors that grow on this particular type of rock. So I just wanted to bring that into the idea of the whole birthing process into emerging into another life. So this all connects in a sense to the life cycle that that Hopi people look to, you know, from birth, infancy, childhood, adolescence, and then maturity, and then finally, as Joseph Campbell put it, the grand exit. So this idea of just life being in cycles also ties into the whole whirlpool blossom and its cyclical movements as well. Okay, next one, please. That's a picture of me kind of getting myself centered again. That was taken in a corner that was in a museum gallery in Fukuyama, Japan, several years ago, where I was doing some consulting work for the museum. Part of my reason for going there was that they had over 300 Kachina dolls in their collections and in their galleries, but they really weren't documented well. And so I went there and spent a couple of weeks and just went through their collections and tried to refine it for them, to give them a little bit more detail. And if we could identify a doll and its maker, I would, you know, I shared that information with them, because it turns out that some of these dolls that they had in the collection were carvers that I personally knew and grew up with. So that was really interesting. And for me, I guess the meditative process is important. I like to just take periods of time to just sit back and just focus inward, and it just it helps me to clarify a lot of things. So with this particular series, I call this stillness within movement, because if you look at the upper left-hand side of the screen, you see these spherical rocks that are located at a location that we call Talastima, which is north of the Third Mesa area. And the landscape is just beautiful out there. You know, it looks like to me that Jackson Pollock had a field day and went out there and just threw paint all over the place. But it's a really interesting place to visit. And then on the lower left-hand corner, you see a location called the Wave, which is just inside the Utah border between Page, Arizona, and Kanab, Utah. And this is a very secluded place again. Both of them are very quiet. They lend themselves well just to silence and meditation. So I combine those ideas into this glass piece that you see there on the left. The sphere on the inside came from this idea of the spheres that you see in the upper left-hand corner, and the exterior bowl is alluding to the landscape on the Wave. And for me, the sphere on the inside again is similar to the sandstone rock formations that we have here on our reservation. And to me, being centered in yourself, orienting your chakras inwardly, and finding that tranquility within yourself makes you still. And so the inner sphere is that stillness that's in all of us. And the outer flowing is the chaos that is continually in movement around us. Uh, and so you can find calm in yourself, although there's a lot of things happening in the world around you. Uh, so for me, this is an important aspect of my personal well-being, and I try to create pieces that have something to do with meditation and getting focused and just finding that stillness within yourself. Okay, may we move on to the next one? These glass spirit figures are called ancestral figures, or spirit figures, some people call them. These are inspired by the rock art pictographs that you see in the Barrier Canyon area up in Utah. There's an interesting story behind this. In 2005, I was granted a fellowship from the School of American Research to experiment with glass art. And while I was up there, I came across these images on the internet, and it really struck my curiosity. So during a break on one weekend, I took photographs of this back to my community, and I just showed them to different people, different older people at that time. And I asked them if they knew anything about this or if they were aware of these. And the majority of them said yes, they were aware of how they work into Hopi history. And apparently, the idea behind this is that, as we know, a lot of people, Pueblo people, migrated to a lot of different places. And with Hopi, they say that we migrated all the way to the north to where the snow and the ice is, to the west and the east where the land ends and the water begins, and down south. And along these migrations, people would set up communities. They'd set up their homes. They'd start a life, you might say. So they lived there for generations. They would have their cornfields, their homes, their shrines, their granaries. I mean, this was their lives, just in a small local place. But according to Hopi history, that is not where they were to stay. They were to move on and continue these migrations until they finally arrived at their ultimate destination, their final destination that Hopi calls Nasabi, which we refer to as our homeland here in northeastern Arizona. So they said that when the people were ready to leave, or when they made certain stops at places, there was a lot of importance to these locations, a lot of spiritual significance in a sense. And so they would paint these images on the cliff walls. And I asked them, well, why do you think they would do that? And most people would tell me that these are the spirits that would stay back and watch over this place. And so that I took that idea and made this translation into glass, but I have an advantage in that I can employ a lot of different colors, because colors in Hopi culture are given to us as different ideas, things to learn from. So with Hopi culture, we acknowledge the four cardinal directions, I should say, and each direction is assigned a color. So yellow is the north, blue is the west, red is the south, white is the east. And each color represents an idea. The color yellow exists in the world to remind us to approach life with a positive attitude. And because we're a culture that is very heavily dependent on rainfall for our crops and for things to grow, the color blue, which comes to us from the west, represents any kind of moisture. And then the reds and the oranges come to us from the south, and that represents heat and warmth. And then lastly, the east is symbolized by the color white, which can mean purity or it can mean snow. So when you bring these ingredients together and you combine them, basically what you have is you have created the potential for new life. So seeing as we're a corn culture and corn is our main focal point in terms of what life is all about, the color green then becomes the color of life. So when I create all of this work, I just don't throw colors together randomly. I give a lot of thought to what I'm trying to communicate, what ideas am I trying to share. So this is how colors are really influencing how I choose to approach my artwork. And also, of course, the history of all of this comes into play with these spirit figures. All right, the next one. Okay, we're all about corn out here. uh, like I mentioned before, we acknowledge the four cardinal directions with certain colors. So you can see that the ears of corn in this picture here are representative of the four cardinal directions. And these four ears play an important role not only in everyday life, but also in ceremonialism and ritualism. So we do have these colors. They are important, and we have always thought of them as being the crux of Hopi life and what Hopi is all about. And added to that is our idea that the female is associated with the corn plant because the female bears children just as the corn stalk will bear ears of corn, which we call the children. So in Hopi culture, there comes a point in a young lady's age where she's capable of bearing children, but she's not married yet. So when a girl is in that point of her life, she wears her hair in a special way that we call poliini, and that refers to a butterfly whorl. So you can see in this photograph that this young lady has her hair done up in that style. Once she gets married and completes her traditional wedding ceremony, then she will no longer be eligible to wear her hair like that. There is a different hairstyle that we have for married women. So this is something that only occurs at a certain point in a girl's life. So being that we look at the females as being the principal givers of life, I took those ideas and I started a series of what I call corn maidens. Here, these are a sculpted glass. They come in a variety of colors. And the one that we have here in the center is depicting the ears of corn, the stages of life from birth to death, the four cardinal directions, two other directions that I choose not to talk about at this point, and then the striations that you see toward the bottoms represents the four worlds. that Hopis look to in their mythology and to their history. So there is a story being told here that we do have our roots. We came from somewhere else. We were born into this world. We live a life cycle as corn plants, and then the finality uh, of this life is to transition into the spiritual life at death. And our belief is that when a person passes on, their spirit becomes part of the clouds. And so up on top of the corn tops, you see just a hint of rain clouds coming down with the rain coming down, because that's our afterlife. When I pass away uh, from this life, I will be born into the spirit life, and my breath will come up, go and join the clouds. And when I come back as a cloud in spirit form, then I will bring rain so that life continues. So it all kind of comes around in this big cyclical idea on a variety of levels in our culture. All right, going on here with the next slide. Uh, I've had a deep interest in the Mimbres culture for a long, long time. Uh, it started shortly after I graduated from Goddard College with my undergraduate degree, and I had studied cultures quite a bit. And one read that really just took me was a book by Carl Jung called Man and His Symbols. And I've been a Carl Jung fan since then. So I'm really interested in symbolism from different cultures and why we choose to develop the type of archetypal images that we do. Um, and it just raises a lot of really interesting questions for me even today. So I've really had just this interest, a big interest in the Mimbres culture, because it was here for a little while, and then some people say it disappeared, but I just say that it morphed into something else. So there are still remnants of it here and there. But I took that idea of the history and the imagery and the symbology behind it and try to make sense of it. And I don't know if I'm able to do that yet today, but it's very intriguing for me to keep investigating uh, this particular culture. And so I was commissioned to do a corn maiden, but use images from the Mimbres culture. So you can see that at the base of the corn maiden in the center picture, at the bottom it looks like the beginnings of a snake, but what it actually is, it's a tadpole, and there's a fish right above it. I'm sorry you can't see the entire image, but it is a fish. And then on top of the fish is another tadpole. And then above that, you see images of rain and clouds coming down. And if you look to both of these examples of Mimbres ceramics, you can see the similar geometrical patterns on the left and also the image of the fish on the right being incorporated into this. And so this is really where I'm at this point in my artist life, is focusing on the Mimbres culture and trying to make sense of it for one thing, but also trying to continue the imagery that they left with us. Uh, so I'm developing techniques and ways to replicate Mimbres pottery in glass, and it'll be probably take me some time to really get to a point where it looks like Mimbres pottery. But that's down the road. It's a lot of experimenting that I have to do with trying to using different techniques to get this effect. So believe we're at the end of this slide presentation. So I'm open to comments and questions. I'd love to have a discussion with you at this point. So why don't we just open up the floor?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ramson, for a really interesting and great presentation, and your work is just incredible. We do have a few questions. I know more will probably start coming in, is usually the case. But yeah, so let's see here. I'm trying to just narrow down on which one to ask first. So a guy named, I think it's John Cater, asks a couple of questions, and he is asking, so the piece that shows the corn and the butterfly world, he thinks is mind blowing, and he says, can you tell us about how you made this wonderful piece, especially the butterfly worlds?
Yeah, it's not as easy as it appears. It actually took three of us. I had two other glass artists assist me because with my hot shop or glass blowing studio here on the reservation, everything is smaller in size. So I'm constrained by the size of the furnace, by the size of the furnaces that we use to reheat our pieces. So I can only go so large at home. If I'm going to do something larger as these corn maidens, I go to Santa Fe to a place called Prairie Dog Glass, and there happens to be 3 or 4 other native glass artists who tend to congregate there. One of them is from Taos, New Mexico. The other one is from Okeowinge, and there's one other from Isleta Pueblo. So we tend to just all gather there, sometimes by happenstance, and we just assist each other. So this corn maiden requires 4 or 5 different layers of glass. They are blown. I do the shaping, and I'm seated at what we call the bench, and the other two I start the project by blowing the first 2 layers and creating a bubble in there, and then they give it an occasional reheat periodically so that it doesn't stress and crack. And they bring it to me. I shape it. I blow it out some more, and you do need this assistance because the piece does get heavy in weight. And so the way that we apply the colors on here are using glass powders. The first layer that we used in this particular piece was white, and we gave it a nice heavy coating of white, and then we coated it with cobalt blue. So you have a layer of white that's covered entirely with cobalt blue. And then it's during this point where we do add the hair whorls on, but they're made with glass that's black. So these are 2 pieces. The hair whorls are separate pieces that are attached to the side while the glass is still hot. And it takes a certain amount of dexterity and being able to find the center on each side of the head to place them correctly. So once we do that and the piece is finished, then it's annealed overnight. And when it's cooled down to room temperature, then I'll take it back home and I'll mask it over and use an X-Acto knife to cut out the positive and the negative space. So it's it's a long process, and it's time consuming in that you're cutting away with an X-Acto knife all the parts that you want to peel off, and when that's done, then you sandblast the entire thing to give it the matte finish on the underside. So when you sandblast it, you sandblast away the blue until you get to the layer of white. So it's not an easy proposition. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work, and of course I have to travel to New Mexico to do these larger pieces, so it eats away at my time.
And just to clarify, how large are these?
This one happens to be about 16 inches tall. Depending on how many layers of glass you put into it, they can be a little shorter or a little bit taller. So it'll vary with the amount of glass that you use to blow out the piece.
Oh, that's amazing. So there was a question also about, are there any other artists at Hopi or otherwise that have influenced your work?
Yeah, I would say one person in particular was a jeweler by the name of Charles Loloma. I not necessarily mentored under him, but I grew up picking up a lot of his knowledge because for many years he was the facilitator for the bean ceremony that occurs in February, or as we call it, Puamaya. And so I was initiated into that society when I was about 12 or 13. And over the years, I just gained a lot of knowledge from him growing up, not only about the ritual, but also about living life as a human being, looking at art in different ways, because he was a world-class jeweler. He painted. He started out doing ceramics, so he was very, very rich in knowledge, and he was a great mentor. So that was one Hopi artist that I was really influenced by in my earlier years, and then later on, I came across a jeweler and a painter by the name of Michael Caboti, who introduced me to the 12-step program. And so Michael influenced me a lot in finding sobriety, and just learning how to be born again, in a sense, and to start living life according to certain traditions and principles, which happen to meld very, very well with Hopi traditional um, lessons and matters of morals and ethics and all that stuff. So he was also the other big influencer in my life.
I was lucky enough to meet him as well, and he was quite the artist and quite the guy. That's great. So there's one question that popped up for a few places is, where can one purchase your amazing art? Like, where do you normally have that for sale? Is it online or specific shops?
Well, I'll be real honest with you. I do have a website, but it needs a lot of improvement. I'm not a website developer myself, so it's all fingers. I call it, it's an all fingers website, and it just needs to be worked on. But I do have a website. It's called hotvelaglassworks.com. I also post my work on Instagram and Facebook, primarily with Instagram for my work. So if I do have pieces available, I will post them online and just, leave it at that. And if people are interested, then they can direct message me or send me an email or call me on the phone, whichever. I also have a gallery representation in different parts of the Southwest. Um, the latest thing for me was being a part of a Native American glass artists exhibit at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture in Santa Fe. That exhibit ran for about close to 2 years. It closed down in Santa Fe this past June, but it will be traveling now to several museums across the country and possibly one overseas. And this corn maiden, the blue one that you see there, is in the exhibit. So we won't be seeing her for about 2 or 3 years now until she comes back home.
Beautiful work.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So then is that for the Instagram and Facebook, is that just under your name?
It is. Yeah, just do Ramson Lomatewama and it should pop up in there somewhere, or Hopi artist. Um, yeah, you can, and you can also just Google. On my website, I do have my email address and my phone number.
Great. So we have time for a couple more questions, and there's a few more. There's a couple that are more technical about the glass forming process, and then there's a couple more about some of the connections you talked about. So why don't we talk about first the somebody commented and was really odd about how narrow the base is of these corn maidens, and was wondering how you achieve that. How do you get them to stand on such a narrow base and be centered and such? And I wondered if you might have some tips for folks.
Well, one thing that we're taught about working with hot glass like this is that you have to keep everything centered. Um, that's the key right there. Balance. I mentioned earlier that I worked with a group of high school students in Idlewild, California, at Idlewild Arts Academy. And one of the first things that I told them was, yeah, glass blowing is an aesthetic art. It's beautiful. But I said, the other side of the coin is it's a very technical art form. And you're only dealing with three things here when you're dealing with hot glass art. You're dealing with math, physics, and chemistry. That's it. So we went over what is an X, Y, and Z axis. We talked about the center of gravity and how important that can become, about a fulcrum, resistance. I mean, we talked a lot about technicalities there in this class, and really when you're doing glass art, you're employing all of those three areas.
Oh, that's interesting. So they need to come take a class with you, is what it sounds like, to
Well,
really get the inside.
well, now that you bring it up, I do offer classes here at home. But I don't just do glass art. I also incorporate Hopi culture and Hopi history and a couple of field trips. Glass art is great, and the experience is wonderful, but there's so much more to it than just the art. There's culture, there's history, there's a lot of things that happen that you can connect to this. Uh, there are some people who just they don't really want lessons, but they'd like an experience with it. So, uh, I'll make arrangements to have them at least be involved in the making of something fairly simple, like a flower or a paperweight or something like that. So those are short-term experiences, and people get to be involved with that, which is different from actually taking glass blowing lessons, which is more long-term.
So then, to tie back in what we were just talking about, can people find out about those workshops and experiences on your Facebook and Instagram accounts, or is that where would they find out about the details of it?
They can call me directly, and you're free to share my information. You're free to share my phone number and my email if people do want to contact me.
Great, thank you. So yeah, so then there's a couple more questions then. Again, getting to your incredible techniques, and you mentioned going to Japan a few years back, and one uh, viewer wondered if there was other, Japanese techniques that may have influenced your work or that you got inspiration from.
Uh, yeah, the influence was certainly there. It wasn't necessarily actually working with the glass, because glass blowing basically is the same no matter where you're going. You're working with molten glass that's 2100 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're shaping it and you're blowing bubbles, and you're adding details. So in terms of that part of it, it's pretty much the same no matter where you go. Uh, what I found very interesting, and what I grew from, was their approach philosophically to that. Because in Kyoto, uh, there it's that particular city was so rich in philosophy and worldview and spirituality, that I started reading up on Shintoism, because just by getting acquainted with it, I found that it's closely tied into the same philosophies and views of Hopi, uh, which is interesting, because when I was in India about 30 years ago, I found the same was true with the Sikh religion. That it parallels Hopi. Uh, in terms of cultures, that seems to have an influence in my own philosophy and my own approach to the work that I do, like just meditating, and that's an Eastern form. And so I got into yoga, I got into meditating. It's I was influenced a lot like that. And another influence was the tea ceremony. Uh, and I'm trying to figure out how can I express that influence in the glass art.
Very interesting. Wow. So then that actually segues pretty well. You are so good. With another one of the questions that really has more to do with the cultural side of things. And again, a question from John Cater talks about, is wondering if you could give us any more insights into that Hopi Mimbres connection that you referenced earlier.
Well, that's a continuum. I mean, there are a lot of images that I could immediately relate to when I saw a sampling of this. You just see images, you see design elements, you see the idea of balance in these. That really isn't balance. When we were working on this members project several years ago, we were at the university in Las Cruces, New Mexico State University, and we were looking over uh, different examples of Mimbres pottery, and with some of the geometrics. Apparently, I coined a term down there. It was asymmetrical balance, because a lot of the if you look at a lot of the geometrics on there, they're achieving balance, but it's not symmetrical, which was, to me, it was really interesting. And that was the only two words that I could come up with to describe it. And they said, oh gee, I think you just coined a new term for us. So I guess it picked up, because I hear it every so often now. from different people. But again, it's the Mimbres people did not disappear. They just didn't vanish into thin air, but they slowly transitioned into someone else. And that someone else could be different Pueblo people. It could be different, maybe people, Tohono O'odham or whatever. You know, there's this diaspora that's kind of going. You know, it's flowing into another realm of thinking, and slowly it evolves with that. And what to me, what brings it all together are uh, what kind of alludes to this idea of the collective unconscious, which connects humanity. So that's the interesting part for me.
Very interesting. Wow. Huh. And then we just have one last question, and thank you for that insight into Mimbres culture in particular. This connection is Hopi. That's great to hear. But yeah. So one last question, just about how long have you been at glass blowing? I mean, I think you might have alluded to a little bit, but obviously you've been at this for quite a while and have amassed a great amount of expertise, technical expertise. And so there was a question, just how long does it take to get to this point, for you anyway?
It depends, and I'll share with you another short story with these students in Idlewild. And one of the students asked me that, "How long have you been blowing glass?" And I said, "Well, in one part of my life, it's been over 22 years." I said, um, but I was born with this gift already, and I shared that with the students. You are already born with this gift to blow glass. You've had it ever since day one when you came to this world. Um, the thing is that over time, you have to get over the fear, uh, because there are a lot of things that we'd love to do in our lives, but we always say, "I can't do this." Oh, I can't write a novel, or I can't bake a cake. But what people don't understand, and what I told these students, was that you were already born with the gift to blow glass. It's just you number one, you got to get over the fear, and once over you do that, you need to give yourself permission to bring that gift out. And so now, I look at myself. I was always a glass artist from the day I was born. This is what I meant to do. And it took a lot of years before I understood that I needed to get over the fear of telling myself, "Oh, I can't blow glass. It's not a part of our culture. It's not a part of our cultural history. I don't have the tools. I don't have the shop." Um, and once I got over that fear and I gave my permission to do it, then things took off. I was finally on the tarmac, and over 22 years, that's a long time. But during that time, I've been able to learn a lot of things about glass, not only the aesthetics of it, but also the technical aspects of it. So today, I can build my own equipment. I build my own furnaces. Uh, I can weld my own frames. I can wire for electricity. I mean, it just comes along with being a glass blower. And one thing that I shared with these students is that there's the technical aspect of this, and I said you always got to remember that first you're a troubleshooter, and then you're a glass artist.
A metaphor for so many things in life, right? That's great.
Exactly. I mean, you can apply it just to anything really. First get over the fear, and then give yourself permission, because you already have the gift to do it.
I think that's a great takeaway for both glass blowing, like you said, everybody's journey through life, and everything that we all choose to do or should be allowing. I love that, giving yourself permission to do the thing that you already inherently can do. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I don't know how we can improve on that final thought. So, like I said, that's the end of the questions. But thank you, Ramson, so much for joining us this evening. This has been just great to see your work and to get your perspective and to hear these great lessons about art and life and being that you were able to express to us. And I think all of our viewers are really appreciative of that. So thank you very much for
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. So now I need to pack and get up to Wake Forest University on Sunday and spend about a week up there lecturing to different classes.
Oh, great. Well, that should be quite the adventure. Well, hopefully the weather holds up for you. It's now dumping snow here in Cortez.
Yeah, it is here too. So I'm a little bit concerned about flights and stuff. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed spending this short time with everyone here, and I hope everybody is doing well. Having a good life.
Great. Well, we're trying. We're all trying. I'm sure. Well, great. Well, thank you again so much, and we'll pass along your contact information to anybody who's interested, or if they want to email us, we can send them your information. And but yeah, we look forward to hearing from you again. And thank you again for joining us, and thank you everybody for tuning into this great webinar. And we hope to hear from you all soon. Have a good night.
Okay. Thank you very much.